officially welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for coming, for being here. I spent quite a lot of time working with different people, some of you, and saying in the conversations we're having that it doesn't work like that anymore. And you probably say it yourself when you're talking to your clients or when you're talking to your suppliers. You're often saying, no, you don't do it that way anymore. Sometimes it's because of technology, sometimes it's because of attitude, sometimes it's because of just the way we want to do things. We don't have to do certain things anymore. I remember saying to somebody just a few months ago, if you really have to send me a fax, can you ring me first so I can plug it in? There's just no reason to get a message sent to a big box in the middle of the room when I can get it sent to my pocket, for example. So, having said it again and again, I thought it would be worthwhile putting something together that answers that question. If it's not done that way anymore, then what way are things done? So I wanted to bring together a group of people who would be interested in having that conversation, really. So today really is one big long conversation, I hope, where I'd like to share a few things with you. So the first thing I'd like to share is the benefit of what I've learned. Some of you know, who've known me over the years, know that for probably a good 7 or 8 years now, I've been trying to figure out why things are changing. I spent a good deal of my years in HR and a good deal of my years in marketing, and HR is still busy doing lots of things that are big question marks these days. Do KPIs really work? Do annual performance appraisals really make a difference? Do goals really motivate people? So I wanted to figure out whether or not those questions were good questions to ask, or should we keep assuming that they're great ideas? And if you're going to take things away from staff, as you know, you can't just, or customers, you can't just remove them and say it's not a good idea anymore. You have to have a good reason and you have to replace it with something. So I wanted to know what those things were. And over time, as I looked into those questions, I realised it wasn't just a question of whether those were good things, but whether, even if they were they still going to be relevant. And as digital technology started to enter our lives, the answer was no. And I've got my name signed up to, I must have 1,000 apps that I've signed up over time. Some lasted 5 seconds, some I still have, some I signed out of, like Skype. If anyone who used Skype when it first started, it was the most abysmal piece of technology that existed, but look at it now. Because I wanted to find out what some of these questions were. So that's the first thing I want to do, is share some of the things that I've learned over all those years. The second thing I wanted to do was to give you the benefit of some of each other's input. I've got a great diverse group of people here today, from profit, not-for-profit, independents, organisations, different parts of business. So I was really keen. I think I contacted most of you personally or via somebody because I wanted to have that mix of people. We live in a world where everyone connects with everyone. Having a room full of just HR managers or just sales managers would have missed a lot. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to encouraging you to share your experience. And for those who have already commented, yes, I did split you up for that reason, for the people who know each other. And the third thing I wanted to do was to start running this today as in line with what we know about science, research and behaviour. I want to do a very little of this, although it's inevitable that I'll be doing chunks of talking, but we know that's not the most effective way to learn. It's much more effective if you're involved, if you're talking, and if you're moving. So one of the reasons why I was quite keen to be in this room today, apart from the fact that our office is just a few doors down, is because we can move. If it wasn't going to be so hot, we could have actually used Albert Park as well and gone outside and had a walk and talk, because that's such a great way. It's like when you think in the shower, you're not thinking. So if it ends up being not so hot, or some of you love the heat, then we've still got time for that. Otherwise, we can stay indoors and stay cool. So they're the three things that I really wanted to bring today. We don't have long to cover it, so there will be things that I mentioned, but we have to skip over. I've left the end of the day to be your time. So you can either say, let's go back over this, or you can say, look, I just met someone great today and we've got some ideas we want to work on. It's your time. You can say, I'd like to know more about social media, and if we collect the knowledge in the room, we will be able to talk about those things, or crowdfunding, or whatever. It's the end of the day is your time. But the overriding goal of today is to help you build more success into your enterprises. Whether that means more customers, more funding, more value, more sales, more product, whatever it is, that's what the focus is on. So I'll keep bringing it back to how you build more value. And I say value because it's not always money. Some of you are in organisations where it's not about the money at all, and others where it's a lot more about the money. But I'll say value that covers all of that. So I'd like to acknowledge my co-presenter today, who many of you know, my daughter Taya, who's there, and she is our official liaison. So if you need anything from the venue or from us, please go hunt down Taya. Sam, who is, and most of you also know this is a fairly incestuous affair, so Jeff is my husband, Sam is Jeff's son, Taya is my daughter and our daughter, and I'll keep going because I also want to acknowledge you who are here. I know many of you probably, Bronwyn and I used to work together at Crown, and we had a wow of a time because Crown was, was a mad, frantic height of activity when it opened, and then it moved across and reopened. So we spent a lot of time basically doing whatever we thought was a great idea at the time, and many of them were great ideas. So welcome Bronwyn. Bronwyn has kindly invited a colleague from your organisation is?
I work for the Next Steps Work and Learning Centre, which is a program through the Brotherhood of St Lawrence.
Right, so not-for-profit, and Bronwyn is now in recruitment.
That Amanda and I used to work together.
Yeah.
So we did a 6 degrees, it's actually all related today.
Absolutely.
And also Elaine Rock, who is CEO of Encompass Community Services, and she has some of her team here. So welcome to Encompass. Elaine and I have known each other for maybe 13-14 years, and Alex, and do you want to be disassociated today? Alex and I actually spent some time on a board together in the early 2000s, trying to figure out how to get money out of the government. And,
Did you work that out, Isabel?
We worked it out until they told us where to go.
Oh, yeah.
So we left, and then Alex left first, and he left me to deal with the people who were left. I think that's sometimes
It's the only gentleman in this world to do.
So welcome to Alex and Elaine and Encompass. And then if I go in chronological order, I think Al and I met you when we were both doing some work with PFD. It's very hard to say PFD because you're so used to saying PDF. PFD Food Services. And we had our respective areas. I think I was looking after management, bringing new management through the ranks, and Alan was looking after really other important stuff. What was your area? Leadership, process?
Process improvement. Some of the more business skills.
Yeah, okay, great. And for food services, logistics, of course, is a huge part of their success. And Alex has brought along his son Hugh today, so welcome. And John, of course, John Johnson, who I met only last year, but the introduction came through a great friend, mutual friend. So John is, I'll say, former Deloitte. Pauline, whose connection came through Jeff, and friend, we say family to last, a friend who is actually a cousin of Jeff's, his mother's sisters. Is that right? Yes. So, Brent runs his own company, a successful business in equipment for medical research predominantly.
Pretty close.
Yes, okay. Sort of. All right. We have Ross. Ross Digby is also another great associate that we met a couple of years ago. And Ross has had a great history of running businesses, setting up operations, turning them around. And Ross and Alan, you'll have great discussions on business process because I think that's something that you both know inside and out. And ideally what we'll do is over the course of the day move around so that you can get the benefit of different skills. We also welcome Anne who is working with another wife, actually, of not another wife of us, but another wife in my network. And I first met your husband Chris, I think last year, through the Australian Retailers, no, through the National Online Retailers Association. So Chris has a great history in running major retail operations, I think at board level and executive level. So I have pretty much got all, I think. So welcome, and I want to do that introduction so that you would have a chance to know who's sitting around you, and you can tap them on the shoulder for some ideas through the day. So what I wanted to do, now that I've said all that, is in front of you, you have a little card with your name. They're actually name badges. They're sticky name badges, so you can peel the backs off. But before you do, you can pull the paper out, and you'll see in front of you, there is, you have quite a bit of instruments, drawing instruments. I didn't want to put your organisations and titles in. I thought you should choose how you represent yourself to everyone. So if you wish to write your position, you wish to write your company, you wish to write your football team, you wish to... One thing I learned working with Encompass is if you ever get stuck, just say football.
Did you say come on Bombers?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm quite prepared for all the fun.
You can lock the door.
Well,
Lock the door. They can't get in.
So will anybody know what's going on?
So, spoken like a true process person.
Is anything going to be written down?
No, so up to you. So if you pull your name tags out, you can leave them just as your name if you wish. You can decorate them if you wish. You can add. Basically, it's how you want people through the day as they look at your name tag. What can you either contribute to them, talk to them about, ask them about? You can write a question. What's your burning question? How do I get more followers on Facebook? Whatever you like. This is about putting something here that is your first conversation of the day. That's my anticipation of what's going to happen through
So
the
you're
day.
going to give us money? Is that what that...
That's, well,
Lots of love, those things
Well,
going.
you give us money, we give you love.
after I did it, I realised it was like, I love money.
What's wrong with that?
Yes, so I want the heart obviously is the warmth and regard for people in the room and for the subject and enjoy what we do. The arrow is self-explanatory, and of course the triangle is universal symbol for change.
Who's the little group on the right?
I'm in the middle, and that's Tara on the end, although in another year I'll be the little one. Tara will be the big one. And Jeff.
Who's the guy with the funny hair and the shorts?
Well, Sam's got his camera, so I actually think I've got that pretty right. And hopefully through the day, I should have used a smaller marker because the person on the top is winking. No one punched them in the eye. Next thing I want to introduce to you is this roll of paper that's sitting on your table. That role is for you to draw on, and it will be a visual record of what we do today. Now, I want to take a moment to explain the relevance of drawing. Because those of you, like Ross, who has a strong design background, can add to my, what will be explanation, please do. So, drawing uses a very different part of the brain. We're so used to, basically I think from grade 2 or 3, school trains us to stop thinking visually and to start thinking through words. The trouble with thinking only through words is it's actually that utilises the smallest part of our brain, and it's actually also the most highly competitive part of our attention. Because a lot of the data that comes in through this processing part of the brain that is actually linked, and because there is so much information vying for our attention, it only utilises our short-term memory. So the brain says, it's probably the greatest filter on earth, the best spam filter ever invented, and it shuffles things out as fast as it takes it in. The visual side of the brain taps into long-term memory, cognitive abilities. It links motor skills with thought. It actually taps into the part of the brain that releases dopamine, which is the reward chemical, which is why this colouring book craze is going nuts at the moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it actually feels good to be drawing.
It's also one of those that helps for drawing and things like that.
Yes.
So you're covering.
Yes, that's
Use
right.
a lot for drawing and artwork.
That's right. So art therapy is a real thing, a big thing. They've actually found that art can slow down the effects of aging. People who've gone through trials, have gone to regular art therapy or art classes, show slowing signs of age-related illnesses like dementia. So not that I think anyone needs that, but I would encourage you to unroll that paper as you go. Use that to write notes to each other, doodle questions, brainstorm. When you do group work, I'd like you to do it on that, and we'll just keep the page going. You can use up the whole roll, and then we'll also have a lovely visual record of all the things that you've done. And as you swap tables, of course, then you'll add to other people's, what people have done. So add to each other's drawings, go crazy with colour. What I'll do is actually, in the next couple of minutes, in your books, I've left a little questionnaire. So I'm going to ask if you could do two things. One is to answer the top section of this questionnaire, so your name, tick the box because we have a camera going and I don't want to take for granted that you want to. Casey, pens? The pens, remember? You need a pen? I've got a pen. Then I have three questions for you. And once you've answered those questions, have a think about them. Then you can start by rolling that paper and put your reactions to those questions onto that paper. So they can be visual, they can be colour, they can be questions. You can make a list of things that you'd like to cover today. And as you think of things that you want to talk about, or you think that's a good question I'd like to ask later, or I want to come back to, write it down, and then we'll go back at the end of the day and check that we've covered them all. Feel free to keep adding to the page so that we collect your thoughts, questions, ideas. Sometimes what you put down, especially if it's an image, will speak to someone else. It'll make sense to someone else in a way that you don't intend. We're amazingly good at seeing patterns in pictures, even patterns that the drawer didn't really intend. Vision or visual information has no bias because it has no language. Because it doesn't. Language is inherently often very, very biased, as people, particularly in disability, or gender issues, images rarely have bias because we don't have to think them before we get them down. You can just, it's a direct brain to hand activity. So I encourage you to keep doodling on that page and keep looking back at what you've done and what we can address. So let me start with the first question. What did you think, or what do you think the digital economy needs?
We're supposed to talk about that, were we?
I got the feeling that if I didn't stop, we wouldn't go anywhere near it. So what do you think it is? Let's start with what your current understanding is.
It's a communication method.
Communication method, yeah?
Simply done.
Yes?
A list of instructions.
As in,
Well, there's so many different platforms and there's so many different types of social media. And when you start using the new ones, so there's Facebook, Instagram, all these different things. You're saying, okay, am I using it for business? Am I using it for personal? What's the best way? How do you get the most out of it? Do you does it come with, okay, if you want to do this, if it's like things that you learn, I mainly learn from other people. It's not from going on and finding out about that app or whatever it is. If somebody shows me how to use it and they're the instructions. But if there was some way of finding out how to do things, I guess yourself or through these apps or these different, these different platforms, that might be very handy.
yeah. So, and
I didn't know things like, until our last job that with Facebook you can actually, pay money to target different areas and target different age groups, and so when you're using these different forms of social media and you realise that you might have tagged in on your location or something like that, and all of a sudden they start sending you things about that location, and there's so much more to know behind what's actually going on. Yeah, so things like that would be handy to know, I guess, or to know about.
So I guess it's really about information sharing, isn't it? And we've always done that with a piece of paper, but I'll post it to you and you'll get it at the end of the week. But today it's virtually instant. So that's changed the paradigm for how rapidly we can share information and how completely we can share. And then, you have all the issues of the expectation of instant response, and then and being drowned in information.
Yeah.
So processing it. So it seems to me to be about that information sharing.
and the problem of unintended sharing, where you're thinking, that is really scary.
Be very careful before you hit the reply button. In fact, don't use it, disable it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing I find too is before we had the time issue, you had time you were given something to think about, and I'd paper, brainstorm ideas, and I'd come up with, so I'd be able to come up with immediate ideas and then readdress them, look at them again, come back. Before I actually had to respond, it wasn't this, and you've got to get beyond, I've just received an email, therefore I've got to respond, I need to answer it. And it's taken me a little while, coming from a non-computer background at all, to get used to that idea and really think about what I want to respond to that, and not because it's coming on my inbox, that it automatically deserves an answer and I'm expected to be able to come up with my best answer straight away. So that thinking, because I used to have always had that time in the thinking and looking at what my immediate responses are, and then melding that to a better response, whether it be all these different ideas, well really only these two are really relevant, and creating an answer that's appropriate to that, and allowing discussion of those ideas from getting the question to actually then responding to it with others if appropriate, or just that time. And I think that's a pressure that even though people are acknowledging, it's still not accepted. I think that the pressure is still there, and I think it's getting greater.
Yeah, one of my headaches is when I come back from holiday and you turn on that computer and open your inbox, and then you get this mass of emails, and you do feel that pressure.
Yeah, the obligation.
Yes.
There's also been the acceleration of the change over the last couple of decades. It's been massive. I can remember a conversation I had with someone many years ago when for the first time we had a room in a house we could dedicate to a home office. And I said, I think we should put a computer in here. And the response was, no, we don't need that. We've got those at work. We don't need something like that at home.
And how we're carrying on.
You carry it in your pocket these days.
Yeah, and it's the whole bringing work home as well with Facebook these days,
Yeah.
that you get home from work and you get an inbox and you just feel obliged to answer it even though it's not working hours, but you sit there and you write back and you go, oh, I shouldn't have done that because now everyone's going to expect me to reply after hours.
Yeah.
The idea of working hours is changing too because of that, and it's 24/7 as they say. I think it's one of the greatest things, digital stuff, but I also think it's one of the worst, and loss of privacy. I don't think that's a concept, unless you are very disciplined in how, what, where and whatever. There is no privacy anymore.
No. Yeah, it's a disappearing, or it's definitely a changing concept. We would have been horrified in the past to share some of the things, or to know some of the things about others, or have them know about us, but it's not quite so strange anymore.
But I don't think you've got control over that as much either. Like, my daughter was saying to me about photos of her that were tagged.
Yes.
And she showed me and she said, she untagged. I don't even know how to do any of this stuff. So she untagged herself. So she said, I just can't put my name to anything because as soon as my name's tagged, anything comes up. And she said, that was my own private time. So yeah, I probably see it more through my children than I do myself because I've got a Facebook account, never ever go on it, haven't got time for it. But now with business, we're finding you've got to change those attitudes.
Yes.
I'm lucky to have time to catch up with my kids or friends or anything like that. So the idea of Twitter or anything like that just makes me go, why on earth would you spend time?
I 24/7 on Facebook, and most of it's about business.
Yeah, well, but this is what I've got to learn, that get rid of that thought process that it's a waste of my time.
That's right.
I have to use it as a tool.
Yes.
And that's probably why I came to that instead of Chris, because I said I'm the one that really needs to understand how to change my mindset. Because in each of the fields that I've been working in, it's, even when I was lecturing at university, I lectured at university for 15 years, and the biggest push that made me leave university was that I was then at beck and call of my students 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I just thought, and they would send me work at midnight that was due the next day and expect me to go through it.
Give them feedback.
Master's students, and I'd look at them and think, are you kidding me? And this was, my kids were little then. And so as much as I loved doing what I was doing, it just became, that was a big push. But yeah, it just got to a point where I just said, this is silly. And so I pulled myself away from it, and now I'm finding I really need to re-immerse and get much more savvy at it.
So it's an interplay between the technology and the mindset, and that's, I think, the gap most people have difficulty with. You know what it means externally, and when you think about it, you can work out how it's changed your expectations. But what about that on a broader scale, and then what about that in terms of your organisations, which is what we want to cover. And so of all the things that quickly jotted down while you were speaking, very little of it is about technology, but it's all because of technology. So you can't really have a conversation about digital without talking about technology, but it's not going to be the major focus of the day. What I'd like to spend some more time on is what it means. So to begin with, I want to start teasing out some of these ideas that you brought up, some of the expectations, what it means, how it's changing our mindset, and then that mindset you can compare with how you think about and how you think your customers or staff or suppliers think. And as well as putting my notes together, I couldn't help, one thing that I remembered, which I'll share because a couple of people in here are far too young to remember what this was like. But talking about emails, and emails being slow. Do you remember when you used to have the inter-office envelope? Do you remember the envelope?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened was, if there were 50 people you wanted to see this memo, you stuck it in an envelope, you wrote all their names down,
Yeah.
you went into the inbox of one, you took it out, you read it, you crossed yours, and then you put that envelope in the next person's inbox. And this went on.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you looked for an assistant, tracker dog had to be one of the criteria because inevitably, somewhere it would be lost. Someone would have it, and then you have to hunt it down and see. Those were the days. So you think email's slowing down. So one of the things what I want to do is I've got a collection of videos that I'll play during the day, and the intention with those videos is just examples of things that are happening to our expectations or to society's expectations. I'm not necessarily promoting these videos, I'm not necessarily saying they're great videos, but they're all being chosen because they represent a mind shift that is either present in today or is an indication of more is to come. So one of the things that I want to touch on as we do that is really to your comment. Ellie, so yes, the first thing about digital is this idea of communication, and so and it's not just communication as we know it, where it's deliberate, but in the world of digital, it's communication that we don't even mean. So I don't use, for example, I don't use my phone. I don't put my addresses in the phone's GPS because you always hear the stories. You lose your phone and it says home, work, and people say, well, I'm guessing you're at work, so I'll go to your home right now. So I never put any of that in. But obviously I've used the GPS and the maps function enough that Google has worked out where I live and work. And I remember having an appointment at a hairdresser's and I made the appointment online. Nothing to do with anything else. Then my phone beeped and a little card came up, so if you've got an Android, you see the cards that come up, and it said, if you want to make it to your hairdressing appointment, leave now. So it knew where I had to be and where I was, and how long it would take me to get there. So it's not even communication that you mean, it's communication you don't mean. And yeah, my first thought was, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And my second thought was,
I don't like that.
what else? Yeah.
George Orwell, but yeah,
That's it.
the preemptive stuff
Yeah.
is pretty
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
I also never put my birthday into, it's a Skype, you can put your birthday and then it sends everything to or Facebook. I never do that either. And then when I logged on to my computer, my laptop, on the day it happened to be my birthday, there's a Google homepage with a Google Doodle, and it was a birthday cake and it said, Happy Birthday, Isabel.
Yes.
So I wasn't sure if I was creeped out or impressed or chuffed that Google was the first person to wish me happy birthday for the day.
Sorry, had your husband remembered?
Well, please, don't ask me what day my birthday is. He still guesses. He still says it with a question mark on
I rely on Google.
Okay, so, and communication is also built into everything that we work on. So when you when you book something using TripAdvisor, it asks you, how did you like this experience?
Yes.
When you buy something online, you'll get someone who says, how would you rate your store? When you book something via your phone app or whatever, it'll give you an opportunity to chat. So people are so used to communication being part of everything. If you're not building communication into what you do, how you do it, so that it's available within the process, not a separate process, within the process, you're already missing out. So that's one of the first things I want to raise that digital does for us. It turns our expectations into having inbuilt communication. So I thought, and some of you might have seen, so one of the videos I'm going to share today is to show you what happens when you don't. First of all, yes, let me start with, many of you know this ad.
Yeah.
Right, so it's a highly successful advertising program. Jeep is doing extremely well in Australia based on that ad. And then you get something like this.